Before we begin, I need you to do something. Stay with me until the end of this story. You won't believe what happens when a broken girl rises from the snow. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city name in the comments below and smash that like button. Now, let's begin. The wolves came for her at dusk. Alara Voss had known this day would come. She'd felt it building in the air like static before a storm, in the way the pack members stopped talking when she passed, in the cold satisfaction gleaming in their eyes. They called it the trial of worth, but everyone knew what it really was: execution dressed up as justice. She knelt in the center of the clearing, snow soaking through her worn pants, breath misting in the frozen air. Around her, a perfect circle of wolves sat watching, their eyes reflecting the dying light. 63 of them. She'd counted. Behind them, the rest of the Coldridge pack stood in the shadows of the pines, waiting for blood. "You understand why you're here, Alara?" The voice belonged to Marcus Stone, the pack's second. He stood at the edge of the circle, arms crossed, his scarred face impassive. She didn't answer. What was there to say? 3 weeks ago, Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the silent clearing, you were presented to Rowan Ashford, your destined mate. The bond was confirmed by the pack elders. The ceremony was prepared. Alara's hands clenched in the snow. She remembered. How could she forget? And yet, Marcus said, stepping forward, when the moon rose and the bond should have sealed, you failed. Your wolf remained silent, dormant, useless. He spat the last word like poison. Rowan Ashford, son of our Alpha, rejected you publicly, as is his right. Murmurs rippled through the gathered pack. Alara kept her eyes down, focusing on the snow beneath her knees. Each flake was unique, intricate, beautiful. Strange what the mind fixated on when death was breathing down your neck. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Marcus asked. Now Alara looked up. Her gaze swept across the circle, landing on familiar faces. Faces that had once smiled at her, or at least hadn't openly sneered. Her former mentor, Elena, who'd taught her to track. The healer, Mrs. Brennan, who'd bandaged her scraped knees when she was small. The young mothers who'd let her help mind their children. None of them met her eyes now. No, Alara said quietly. I have nothing to say. Because they wouldn't believe her anyway. How could she explain that her wolf had always been there, just beneath her skin, whispering, waiting? That she'd felt it stir during the bonding ceremony, felt it reach for Rowan's wolf, and felt it recoil in instinctive rejection? Something had been wrong with that bond from the beginning. She'd felt it in her bones. But no one wanted to hear that Rowan Ashford, golden son of the Alpha, might not be her true mate. The pack had already decided. She was the defective one, the broken Omega who couldn't even produce a wolf when her biology demanded it. Then let the trial begin. Marcus raised his hand. The circle shifted. 63 wolves, all watching her with predatory focus. This was how the pack dealt with those deemed unworthy. Throw them to the wolves, literally, and let nature decide. If she survived until moonrise, she'd be cast out, but alive. If not, well, the mountains would claim another corpse. Alara slowly rose to her feet. Her legs trembled, but she locked her knees and stood straight. If she was going to die, she'd die on her feet. Look at her, someone called from the crowd. Mira, one of the young females who'd been particularly cruel since the rejection. She thinks she's brave. Laughter, sharp and cutting. Brave? Another voice joined in. She's just stupid. Can't even shift. What kind of wolf can't shift? Not a wolf at all, Mira sneered. Just human trash pretending to be one of us. The circle tightened. One of the wolves, a massive gray male named Thane, took a step forward. His lips pulled back, revealing teeth designed to tear flesh from bone. Alara's heart hammered. The instinct to run screamed through every nerve, but there was nowhere to go. The circle was complete. Running would only trigger the chase reflex, make them strike faster. I'm not running, she said more to herself than to them. Thane's growl rumbled like distant thunder. Another wolf joined him, then another. They moved in slow, deliberate steps, savoring the hunt. This wasn't about justice, it was about entertainment. From somewhere in the crowd, Alara heard Rowan's voice, lazy and amused. Make it quick, at least. She's not worth dragging it out. Something inside her chest twisted. Not pain, exactly. More like the snapping of the last thread connecting her to the girl she'd been. The girl who'd believed she belonged here, who'd tried so hard to fit in, to be worthy, to earn their acceptance. That girl was dead. The new Alara, the one standing in this circle, felt something different burning in her veins. Not fear, not anymore. Rage. "Come on then," she said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "If you're going to do this, do it. I'm tired of waiting for you people to decide I'm worth something." Thane lunged. Alara didn't close her eyes. She watched him come, watched his muscles bunch and extend, watched his jaws open wide. Time seemed to stretch, each second lasting an eternity. She could see the individual snowflakes falling between them, could hear her own heartbeat counting down her final moments. The wolf's breath hit her face, hot and rank. And then the world cracked. It wasn't a sound. It was a sensation, like reality itself splitting down the middle. The pressure came first, slamming down on the clearing with such force that Alara's knees buckled. She hit the snow hard, gasping as the air turned thick and heavy, charged with a power that made her teeth ache. Thane's lunge became a desperate scramble backward. He whined, actually whined, and flattened himself against the snow, head down, tail tucked. Around the circle, every single wolf dropped into submission. Not the formal crouch of pack hierarchy, but something deeper, more primal. Pure, instinctive fear. The crowd behind them scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Screams and shouts filled the air, pack members trampling each other in their desperation to get away from... what? Alara struggled to her hands and knees, squinting through the sudden wind that had risen from nowhere. The snow swirled in violent eddies, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. The temperature dropped so fast that frost formed on her eyelashes. Through the white chaos, a shape emerged. He walked through the storm like he owned it. Tall, at least 6'4", with broad shoulders and a presence that seemed to push against the very air around him. His black coat billowed behind him, snow melting before it could touch the dark fabric. But it was his eyes that stopped Alara's breath. Silver. Pure, molten silver, glowing with an inner light that had nothing to do with the reflected snow. Every instinct screamed at her to lower her gaze, to submit, to acknowledge the crushing dominance radiating from this man in waves. But she couldn't look away. Something in those silver eyes held her frozen, suspended between terror and a strange electric anticipation. He stopped at the edge of the circle. The wolves that had been ready to tear her apart moments ago now pressed themselves into the snow, whimpering like puppies caught misbehaving. "Well," the stranger said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. "What do we have here?" No one answered. No one dared. His gaze swept across the prostrate wolves, the scattered pack members, the entire pathetic scene, with an expression of cold contempt. Then those silver eyes landed on Alara, still on her hands and knees in the center of the circle, and something shifted in his face, something that made her stomach drop and her pulse spike. Recognition. But that was impossible. She'd never seen this man before in her life. "Stand up," he commanded. It wasn't a request. Alara's body obeyed before her mind could process the order, muscles moving on pure instinct. She rose on shaking legs, snow falling from her clothes. She was a mess, dirty, bleeding from a split lip she didn't remember getting, clothes torn and wet. But she stood. The stranger moved closer. Each step was deliberate, controlled. The movement of a predator who knew nothing in this forest could challenge him. He crossed the circle in 3 long strides and stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. Alara's throat was too dry to speak. She shook her head. A slight smile touched his mouth, but there was nothing warm about it. "My name is Darian Thorn, the Alpha King, ruler of the Northern Territories, commander of 15 packs, and the wolf your pathetic little pack just decided to interrupt with their petty entertainment." The Alpha King. The words hit like a physical blow. Every pup in every pack grew up hearing stories about the Alpha King, the strongest wolf alive, the ruthless leader who'd unified the fractured packs through sheer force of will. He was legend, myth, not someone who actually showed up in person to witness a trial in some insignificant mountain pack. "You picked a bad day to execute your week," Darian continued, his voice conversational despite the deadly undercurrent. I was tracking a rogue band through these mountains. Imagine my surprise when I felt this, he gestured at the circle, spectacle of cruelty broadcasting itself like a beacon. Behind him, someone stirred. Marcus, gathering what remained of his courage. Your Majesty, this is pack business. The trial is within our rights according to the old laws. Darian's head turned slowly toward Marcus. He didn't say a word, didn't need to. Marcus's voice died mid-sentence, and he dropped to his knees so fast Alara heard his bones crack against frozen ground. The old laws, Darian repeated softly, turning back to Alara. Yes, let's discuss those. Let's discuss. His hand came up, and Alara's breath caught, but he only reached out and gently tilted her chin, examining the cut on her lip. Tell me, what terrible crime did you commit to deserve this? Alara's voice cracked. She swallowed hard and tried again. I failed to complete a mate bond. My wolf wouldn't emerge. Wouldn't or couldn't. They say I'm defective, that I'm not a real wolf. Darian's thumb brushed across her lower lip, right over the cut. The touch was light, almost clinical, but it sent a shockwave through her entire body. Heat exploded in her chest, spreading outward in waves that made her gasp. His eyes widened. Just a fraction, but she saw it. Surprise, sharp and genuine, flashing across his face before his expression locked down into careful blankness. Interesting, he murmured, pulling his hand away. But the heat didn't fade. It grew stronger, building in her chest until she felt like her ribs might crack from the pressure. Alara pressed her hand over her heart, confusion and fear warring in her mind. What was happening? The bond snapped into place with such force that she cried out, staggering backward. It was like a cord of pure energy lashing between them, connecting her chest to his, pulsing with a power that made her previous bond with Rowan feel like a joke. This was real. This was consuming. Mate. The word echoed through her mind, not in her voice, but in something deeper, older, primal. Mate, mate, mate. Darian caught her arm, steadying her. His face had gone completely blank, but she could feel the echo of his shock through the bond, could feel him slamming up walls against it, trying to block the connection. No, he said flatly. Absolutely not. The rejection should have hurt, should have shattered her. Instead, it just made her angry. I didn't ask for this either, Alara snapped, jerking her arm free. The bond pulsed between them, undeniable, and she saw his jaw tighten as he felt it too. For a long moment, they stared at each other. The clearing had gone completely silent. Even the wind had died, leaving only the soft whisper of falling snow. Then Darian's expression shifted, hardening into something cold and decided. He turned to face the gathered pack, and when he spoke, his voice carried the absolute weight of command. This trial is over. This pack is now under my direct authority. Gasps and protests erupted from the crowd. Someone, it sounded like Alpha Ashford himself, started to object, but Darian cut him off with a single raised hand. The old laws you're so fond of citing? I'm abolishing them. Effective immediately. No more trials by combat for the unworthy. No more execution of pack members who fail to shift or bond on command. His gaze swept across them, silver eyes blazing. You want to know why your pathetic tradition ends today? Because this woman you were about to murder carries a bloodline that makes every single one of you look like mongrel strays. Alara's head snapped toward him. What? Darian reached out and grabbed her hand, lifting it high. The bond flared at the contact, and this time she saw what he saw, her skin beginning to glow with a faint ethereal light. Ancient script, in a language she didn't recognize, traced itself up her arm in delicate silver lines, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. The lunar bloodline, Darian announced. Thought extinct for over 2 centuries. Hunted down and slaughtered because weak, frightened alphas feared their power. He dropped her hand but didn't step away. Her wolf didn't emerge because you idiots tried to bond her to someone incompatible. Her power was suppressed, locked down, waiting for the right trigger. His smile was all teeth and no humor. Congratulations. You nearly destroyed one of the rarest wolves alive. And my mate. The silence that followed was absolute. Alara's mind reeled. Lunar bloodline? Ancient power? This had to be a mistake, some kind of misunderstanding. She was nobody. She'd never shown any signs of special abilities, never felt anything except the vague presence of a wolf she couldn't reach. But the script on her arm was still there, still glowing, still pulsing with each beat of her heart. And deep inside, in the place where her wolf had always been just out of reach, something was waking up. Rowan pushed through the crowd, his handsome face twisted with disbelief and anger. That's impossible. I'm her destined mate. The elders confirmed what you wanted them to confirm, Darian interrupted. A destined mate bond is rare, yes, but it's not infallible, especially when one party carries dormant power that changes their entire energetic signature. He glanced at Alara, something almost like curiosity flickering in his eyes. She couldn't bond with you because her wolf knew she was meant for someone stronger, someone who could match her power when it finally emerged. And that's you? Rowan's laugh was bitter, desperate. You show up out of nowhere and claim she's your mate? How convenient. Darian moved so fast that Alara barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he had Rowan by the throat, lifted off the ground, feet kicking uselessly. The Alpha King's face remained perfectly calm, almost bored. Question me again, Darian said quietly, and I'll paint this snow with your entrails. Are we clear? Rowan managed a strangled sound that might have been agreement. Darian dropped him carelessly, letting him collapse in the snow, gasping and clutching his throat. Now then, Darian turned back to Alara, and his expression softened, fractionally, but enough that she saw it. You have a choice to make. You can stay here with this pack that tried to murder you, or you can come with me. I'll teach you to access your power, train your wolf, show you what you're truly capable of. And the bond? Alara asked, hating how her voice shook. Will be dealt with, one way or another. His silver eyes held hers. I'm not asking you to accept me as your mate. I'm offering you a chance to survive, to become what you were always meant to be. Alara looked around the clearing, at the wolves still pressed into the snow, too afraid to move, at the pack members who'd stood by and watched while she was prepared for execution, at Rowan, still gasping in the snow, his face a mask of humiliation and rage, at Marcus, who'd presented her for trial without a second thought. These were her people, her pack, the only family she'd ever known, and they'd thrown her away like garbage. The choice wasn't hard. I'll come with you, she said. Darian nodded once, as if he'd expected nothing else. He shrugged off his heavy coat and draped it around her shoulders. The fabric was warm, impossibly soft, and it smelled like pine and winter night and something uniquely him that made her wolf stir with interest. Then let's go. He placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the edge of the clearing. We have a long journey ahead. Wait! Elena, her former mentor, pushed forward. Her weathered face was creased with worry. Alara, please. You don't know him. You don't know what you're walking into. Alara stopped, looked back. For a moment, she saw a genuine concern in Elena's eyes. But then she remembered. Elena had been in the circle too. She'd sat with the others, watching, waiting for Alara to be torn apart. I know exactly what I'm walking into, Alara said quietly. I'm walking into the unknown, but that's better than staying somewhere I'm already dead. She turned away before Elena could respond, before any of them could say another word. Darian's hand remained steady on her back as they walked through the gathered pack. Wolves and humans alike parted before them, none brave enough to meet the Alpha King's eyes. At the edge of the clearing, Alara paused and looked back one final time. The circle was still there, the snow inside it stained red with her blood. The wolves were beginning to rise, shaking off their submission now that Darian's full attention wasn't on them. And in the center of it all, Rowan was getting to his feet, his eyes locked on her with an expression of such hatred that it would have terrified her yesterday. Today she felt nothing. Second thoughts? Darian asked. No, Alara said. Just saying goodbye. They walked into the forest together. Behind them, the Coldridge pack watched them disappear into the trees, and Alara didn't look back again. There was nothing left for her there. Whatever came next, whether it was salvation or just a different kind of death, it had to be better than the slow suffocation of trying to belong somewhere she never would. The snow fell harder, covering their tracks. By dawn, it would be like they'd never been there at all. But the bond remained, pulsing steady and strong between them, and deep inside Alara's chest, Her wolf opened its eyes for the very first time. The real trial was only beginning. The journey took 3 days. Elara had expected Darien to shift, to run through the mountains in wolf form the way any sensible alpha would. Instead, he walked. Not the leisurely pace of a nature hike, but a punishing march that had her gasping within the first hour. The snow deepened as they climbed higher into the territories she'd only heard about in whispered stories. The spine of the world, where the peaks touched the clouds and the cold could kill in minutes. He didn't speak, didn't ask if she needed rest. Just kept moving with that relentless inhuman stamina that reminded her he wasn't just any alpha. He was the Alpha King, and whatever softness might have existed in him had been burned away a long time ago. The bond pulsed between them with every step, a constant reminder of the impossible connection neither of them wanted. She could feel him trying to suppress it, slamming mental walls against the tie, and perversely, that made her want to push back, to make him acknowledge it, but she didn't. She saved her strength for putting one foot in front of the other. On the second night, huddled in a shallow cave while wind screamed outside, she finally broke the silence. "Why did you really take me?" Darien was crouched near the small fire he'd built, feeding it branches with mechanical precision. His silver eyes flicked to her, unreadable. "You know why." The bond. She pulled his coat tighter around herself. She tried to give it back that first night, but he'd refused with a curt shake of his head. "But you don't want it. You made that clear. Want has nothing to do with it." He snapped a branch between his hands, the crack echoing sharp in the confined space. "The bond exists. Ignoring it won't make it disappear. So what? You're going to keep me prisoner? Train me to be useful and then figure out how to sever it?" His jaw tightened. "The lunar bloodline can't be wasted. You're right that I don't want to mate. I've managed perfectly well for 200 years without one." 200? Ilar's voice cracked. "I'm old, girl. Older than you can probably comprehend." He threw the broken branches into the fire. Sparks swirled upward, dancing in the draft. "I've seen enough bonds form and shatter to know they're more liability than asset. But what you carry in your blood, that's bigger than both of us. I don't understand any of this." But the frustration bled through her words. "Yesterday I was nobody. Today I'm supposedly some ancient bloodline that everyone thought was extinct. How is that even possible?" Darien was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. When he spoke, his voice had lost some of its edge. "Your parents. Did you know them?" "No. I was found as a baby, abandoned near Coldridge territory. The pack raised me." "Raised you?" he repeated, bitter amusement in his tone. "Is that what they called it? Looks more like they kept you ignorant and broken so you'd never realize what you were." The script on her arm had faded after they left the clearing, but Ilara could still feel it beneath her skin, waiting. "Tell me, what am I?" He looked at her then, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. The lunar bloodline were the first wolves, the originals. They could do things other wolves can't. Heal fatal wounds, compel obedience from any wolf regardless of rank, see through time itself in moments of crisis. They were magnificent and terrifying, and the alphas of the old world couldn't control them. So they killed them. Every last one. Or so everyone thought. His eyes glinted in the firelight. Someone hid you, suppressed your power so thoroughly that it wouldn't manifest until you were triggered by the right catalyst. "You," Ilara whispered. "Me." He stood abruptly, pacing the small space like a caged animal. A true mate bond with someone strong enough to handle the backlash. That's what woke it up. And now every wolf in the Northern Territories is going to come hunting once word spreads. Fear, cold and sharp, sliced through her. Why? Because power like yours upends the hierarchy. Because some will want to control you, use you as a weapon. Others will want you dead before you become a threat. He stopped pacing, pinned her with that silver stare. And you can't even shift yet. Can't fight, can't defend yourself. You're a beacon screaming easy target to every ambitious alpha with a grudge. Then why bring me to your fortress? Won't that just paint a bigger target on both of us? Darien's smile was sharp and cold. Let them come. I've been bored anyway. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Alara lay wrapped in Darian's coat, listening to the wind howl and feeling the bond pulse with his restless energy. He never seemed to sleep, just sat watch by the fire, his body coiled and ready for threats that never materialized. But she felt them anyway, watching, waiting. By the third day, the mountains opened into a valley that stole her breath. A fortress rose from the rock itself, not built but carved, its dark walls seamless with the cliffs. Towers stretched toward the sky, connected by bridges that looked too delicate to support weight but somehow held. Wolves moved along the ramparts, guards, she realized, far more than any normal pack would need. "Welcome to Thornhold," Darian said. "Your new home." The word home felt wrong in her mouth, but she didn't argue. As they approached the massive gates, wolves gathered, dozens of them, all watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The gates opened soundlessly, and Darian led her through into a courtyard that could have held the entire Coldridge pack with room to spare. A woman waited there, tall and severe, with steel-gray hair pulled into a brutal knot. Her eyes, ice blue and calculating, tracked over Alara with the precision of a butcher sizing up meat. "So this is her." Not a question, an accusation. "This is Alara Voss," Darian said. "Alara, meet Kira Stonehand, my second and commander of Thornhold's forces." Kira's lip curled. "The girl who can't shift, the Omega who failed her bonding trial. And you brought her here because..." The temperature dropped. Darian didn't move, didn't raise his voice, but suddenly the air felt heavy enough to crush. "Because she's my mate and carries the lunar bloodline. Question my judgment again, Kira, and you'll be replaced by someone less opinionated." Kira's face went carefully blank, but Alara saw the rage simmering beneath. "Of course, my king. Forgive my concern." "Your concern is noted." Darian's hand found the small of Alara's back again, that possessive gesture she was starting to recognize as his default. "Prepare the East Tower. She'll need quarters, clothes, and privacy. And send for Matthias." "The witch?" Kira's eyebrows rose. "You're letting him near her?" "I'm ordering him to assess her bloodline and determine what we're working with." "Unless you'd prefer I let her power manifest randomly during dinner and accidentally level the fortress?" Kira's jaw worked, but she bowed stiffly. "As you command." She swept away, barking orders at nearby wolves, and Alara felt their stares like physical weight. None of them looked friendly. Most looked downright murderous. "They hate me," she said quietly. "They don't know you yet." Darian guided her toward an arched entrance. "Give them time." "How much time did you give people before deciding they weren't worth it?" His hand tightened briefly against her back. "Touché." The East Tower turned out to be a series of rooms carved into the mountain itself, connected by spiral stairs that made Alara dizzy. Her quarters were at the top, a circular chamber with windows overlooking the valley, furniture that looked hand-carved from ancient wood, and a bed large enough for 4 people. "Excessive," she said. "Practical." Darian moved to this window, scanning the valley with professional paranoia. "You'll be spending considerable time here. Might as well be comfortable." "And the guards I saw stationed at the base of the tower? Are they for my comfort too?" He turned, and something like approval flickered in his eyes. "You're observant. Good. You'll need that." He crossed to her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The bond flared, wanting her to close the distance, and she gritted her teeth against it. "The guards are there to keep threats out and you in. Until you can defend yourself, you don't leave this tower without my explicit permission." Anger sparked hot in her chest. "So I am a prisoner. You're a liability. There's a difference." His eyes searched hers. "I know you're angry. I know this isn't what you wanted, but if I let you roam free right now, you'd be dead within a week. The wolves here aren't like your pathetic pack. They're killers, survivors, the strongest of 15 territories. They respect power and nothing else. Right now, you have none. Then give me some." The words came out fiercer than she intended. "You said you'd teach me. Train me. So do it. Stop treating me like I'm made of glass and show me how to be what you claim I am." Darian studied her for a long moment, and she refused to drop her gaze. Finally, a slow smile spread across his face, the first genuine one she'd seen. "All right," he said softly. "We start tomorrow at dawn. Don't expect mercy." I don't expect anything from you, Elara shot back, except the truth. The smile faded. He stepped back, putting careful distance between them. The truth is a luxury people like us can't afford, but I'll give you this much. If you survive the training, if your wolf manifests and you master even a fraction of what the lunar bloodline is capable of, you'll be more dangerous than anyone in this fortress. He headed for the door, paused with his hand on the frame. Get some rest. You'll need it. He left, and Elara was alone for the first time in days. She sank onto the bed, exhaustion crashing over her in waves, but sleep stayed elusive. The bond pulsed, telling her Darien was close, somewhere in the fortress, probably in his own quarters, probably not sleeping either. Through the window, she watched the sun set behind the mountains, painting the snow gold and crimson. This was her life now. No pack, no family, no one who cared if she lived or died except a mate who didn't want her, and a bloodline she didn't understand. The smart thing would be to cry, to let the fear and uncertainty overwhelm her. Instead, Elara stood and began to pace the room, testing her limits. The windows didn't open. She checked. The door was unlocked, but guards stood at the base of the tower, just as Darien had said. She was trapped in a gilded cage, waiting for dawn and whatever hell he had planned. Fine. Let it come. She'd survived the circle. She'd survived the rejection. She'd survived being thrown away by everyone she'd ever known. She could survive this too. Dawn came cold and merciless. Elara jerked awake to pounding on her door, followed by a sharp voice. Training starts in 10 minutes. Don't be late. She scrambled out of bed, finding fresh clothes laid out. Practical pants, a fitted shirt, boots that actually fit. Someone had come in while she slept, and that thought made her skin crawl. But there was no time to dwell on it. 8 minutes later, she stumbled down the tower stairs to find Kira waiting, arms crossed, expression sour. You're late, I was told 10 minutes. And you should have been early. Weakness number 1, no sense of urgency. Kira turned on her heel. Follow. Try to keep up. The training grounds occupied a massive courtyard carved from the mountain, surrounded by high walls. Wolves were already there, at least 30 of them, all in human form, all engaged in brutal sparring matches that made Elara's stomach turn. Blood stained the snow. Someone's arm bent at an angle that couldn't be natural. But no one stopped. No one yielded. Darien stood at the center, observing, and when Elara entered, every head turned. This is Elara Voss, Darien announced, his voice carrying easily across the space. Some of you have heard rumors. Let me confirm them. She's my mate, she carries the lunar bloodline, and she cannot yet shift or fight. He let that sink in. She's also under my direct protection. Anyone who touches her without my explicit permission will answer to me personally. The message was clear, but the looks Elara received were anything but reassuring. These wolves saw her as weakness, a liability their king was foolish enough to claim. Now then, Darien's eyes locked on hers. Let's see what you're working with. Kira, take first position. Kira moved to the center of the ring, dropping into a fighter's stance. Your Majesty, surely you don't mean... I mean exactly what I said. First position, non-lethal force. Let's see how long she lasts. Elara's heart hammered. I don't know how to fight. Then you'd better learn fast. Darien's expression was granite. Defend yourself. Kira didn't wait. She came in fast. No warning, fist aimed at Elara's face. Pure instinct made Elara duck, but Kira's knee was already rising. It caught her in the ribs with force that drove the air from her lungs. She hit the snow hard, gasping, pain exploding through her side. Pathetic. Kira stood over her. This is what you brought us? This is the legendary bloodline? Elara tried to rise, but Kira's boot pressed down on her chest, pinning her. Stay down, Omega. Save yourself the humiliation. The bond surged with Darien's anger, but he didn't intervene, just watched with those cold silver eyes as Elara struggled beneath Kira's boot. Get up, he said quietly. I can't. You can. Or you can quit now and I'll send you back to Coldridge. Your choice. The thought of going back, of facing those wolves again as a failure, as someone even the Alpha King couldn't fix, it ignited something in her chest. Not power, not her wolf. Just pure, stubborn rage. Elara grabbed Kira's boot with both hands and twisted hard. It wasn't technique, wasn't skill, but it was unexpected enough that Kira's balance shifted. Alara rolled, scrambled to her feet, and this time, when Kira came at her, she didn't try to fight back. She ran. Laughter erupted from the watching wolves. Kira pursued, faster, stronger, catching Alara within seconds and slamming her face first into the snow. Alara's nose crunched, blood pouring hot down her chin. "Is this your mighty mate?" Kira called to Darien. "She runs like prey." But Alara wasn't done. She spat blood and snow, planted her hands, and pushed up. Kira kicked her down again. She got up. Kira struck her across the face. She got up. Again. And again. And again. Each time slower. Each time shakier. But each time she rose. "Enough!" Darian's voice cut through the courtyard. Kira stepped back immediately, leaving Alara swaying on her feet, blood streaming from her nose, ribs screaming, vision blurred, but standing. Darian approached slowly, and the bond carried something she didn't expect. Respect, grudging, but real. "You lasted 4 minutes," he said. "Against a trained warrior, that's impressive for someone who's never fought a day in her life." "I didn't fight," Alara gasped. "I just survived." "Survival is fighting." He gestured, and someone brought a cloth. He took it, and surprisingly gently began cleaning the blood from her face. "You want to know the difference between a warrior and a corpse? Warriors get back up. You did that. Now let's see if we can teach you to hit back." The next 3 hours were hell. Darien paired her with different opponents, always smaller, always weaker than Kira, but still far stronger than Alara. She learned to block by getting her arms broken, learned to dodge by taking hits that left her vomiting in the snow, learned that pain was just information, just her body's way of telling her to adapt. By the time Darien called a break, she could barely walk, but she'd landed 2 hits, clumsy, desperate things that her opponents had laughed off, but hits nonetheless. "Better," Darien said, handing her water. "Tomorrow we'll work on actually making them count." "Tomorrow?" Alara's laugh was half sob. "I'm not sure I'll survive today." "You will." His hand touched her shoulder, and the bond pulsed with something almost warm. "You're stronger than you know." A commotion at the courtyard entrance made them both turn. A man entered, thin, angular, with eyes that seemed to shift color in the light and ink-black marks covering his exposed arms. He moved with a strange, gliding gait that set Alara's teeth on edge. "Matthias," Darien greeted. "Good timing." The man, Matthias, the witch Kira had mentioned, smiled, and it wasn't entirely human. "My king, I came as soon as I received your summons." His gaze slid to Alara, and she felt it like ice water down her spine. "And this must be the anomaly." "Alara Voss," Darien corrected sharply. "Treat her with respect." "Of course." Matthias circled her slowly, studying her from every angle. "Fascinating. I can feel it, you know. The power coiled inside her, locked down so tight it's practically screaming." He stopped directly in front of her. "May I?" Alara looked to Darien, who nodded. "He needs to assess your bloodline. It won't hurt." That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Matthias placed one hand on her chest, directly over her heart, and the world went white. Alara wasn't in the courtyard anymore. She stood in a vast, empty space filled with silver light. In front of her, a massive wolf prowled, easily 3 times the size of any normal wolf, its fur shimmering like moonlight on water. Its eyes, when they met hers, were ancient and knowing. "Finally," the wolf said, its voice resonating in her bones. "You've kept me waiting long enough." "What? Who are you?" "I'm you. The part they suppressed, locked away, tried to destroy." The wolf circled her, and with each pass, Alara felt something inside her chest loosening, cracks spreading through invisible chains. "But I'm awake now, and I'm hungry." "I don't know how to let you out." "Then learn, fast, because our enemies are already moving, and if you can't fight, we'll both die." The white space shattered. Alara gasped, stumbling backward out of Matthias's touch. She was in the courtyard again, snow beneath her feet, surrounded by staring wolves. But everything felt different, sharper, more vivid, and inside her chest her wolf paced, no longer silent. Matthias looked pale, shaken. "That's not possible." "What did you see?" Darian demanded. Her wolf! It's... Matthias's hands trembled. Your Majesty, her power isn't dormant. It's been actively suppressed by magic. Old magic. The kind that requires intent and skill and someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Someone hit her on purpose, Darian said slowly. More than that. Someone bound her wolf with chains that were designed to break only when triggered by a true mate bond. Matthias looked at Alara with something close to awe. Whoever hid you didn't just want you to survive. They wanted you to find the one person strong enough to help you survive what comes next. Which is what? Alara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Matthias's smile was grim. War. The moment word spreads that the lunar bloodline lives, every alpha in the territories will have to choose. Kneel to Darian and his mate, or fight to destroy you before you become unstoppable. Silence fell across the courtyard. Alara felt every eye on her, felt the weight of their judgment, their fear, their calculation. She was supposed to be their king's mate, their future queen, but all they saw was a target, a reason for their home to become a battlefield. Darian's hand found hers squeezing once, a brief acknowledgement of solidarity. Then we'd better make sure she's ready. Kira, double the training schedule. Matthias, start breaking those suppression chains as fast as safely possible. And someone get me a count of our forces. If war's coming, I want to know exactly what we're working with. The courtyard exploded into motion, wolves scattering to follow orders. But Alara stood frozen, Matthias's words echoing in her mind. War. Because of her. Because of what she was. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. Darian turned to her, and his expression was almost gentle. None of us ask for what we're born to. We just decide whether we're strong enough to carry it. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. Are you? Alara thought about the circle, about the trial, about every moment in her life when she'd been told she wasn't enough, wasn't worthy, wasn't strong. She thought about her wolf, finally awake, finally free, pacing inside her chest and waiting for permission to emerge. She met Darian's silver eyes and didn't look away. I guess we're about to find out. The breaking of the suppression chains began that same night. Matthias led Alara to a chamber deep beneath Thornhold, carved from black stone that seemed to swallow light. Symbols she didn't recognize covered every surface, glowing faintly with phosphorescent blue. In the center sat a circle of salt and silver, and the air tasted like copper and ozone. This will not be pleasant, Matthias warned, gesturing for her to sit. The magic binding your wolf was designed to cause pain if tampered with, a failsafe to prevent exactly what we're about to do. Alara lowered herself into the circle, every muscle from training screaming in protest. How much pain? Considerably more than what Kira inflicted this morning. He began arranging candles at precise intervals around her. The bonds are woven into your very essence. Breaking them means unraveling part of your foundation and rebuilding it correctly. Your body will interpret this as an attack. Can I die from it? Matthias's pause told her everything. Darian will be present. If your heart stops, he can restart it through the mate bond. Probably. Probably, Alara repeated flatly. Magic is not an exact science when dealing with bloodlines this old. He finished with the candles and stepped back, surveying his work. But the alternative is remaining bound forever, your wolf trapped, your power inaccessible. When the war comes, and it will come, you'll be defenseless. The chamber door opened. Darian entered, followed by Kira and two wolves Alara didn't recognize. All of them looked grim. We have a problem, Darian said without preamble. Word has already spread. 3 packs have sent envoys demanding I turn you over for proper evaluation of your bloodline. Evaluation, Kira spat. They mean dissection. They want to study her like a lab rat, figure out if they can replicate the power. Alara's stomach turned. How did they find out so fast? Someone talked. Darian's eyes were chips of ice. I'm handling it, but it means we're out of time for a gradual approach. Matthias, how fast can you break the chains? 3 sessions minimum, spaced a week apart to allow her body to recover. You have tonight. All of them. Now. Matthias paled. Your Majesty, that could kill her. The shock alone will be survivable with me anchoring her through the bond. Darian moved to the edge of the circle. his presence somehow making the small space feel even more confined. The envoys arrive at dawn. I need her able to demonstrate power, to prove she's not some helpless Omega they can steal and experiment on. Otherwise, they'll test me. And when I refuse to hand her over, they'll declare war anyway. So we're doing this to prevent a war that's already inevitable? Alara asked. We're doing this so when the war comes, you're not a liability. Darian knelt beside the circle, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw. I won't lie to you. This is going to be the worst pain of your life. But if you survive it, you'll have access to power that'll make everyone who ever called you weak regret it. Alara looked at Matthias, who wouldn't meet her eyes. At Kira, whose expression had shifted from contempt to something almost resembling concern. At the two unknown wolves, who watched her like they were already measuring her coffin. Do it, she said. Darian's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. The bond flared hot and bright between them. I'll be right here, the entire time. You start to slip away, I'll pull you back. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. You don't want this bond. Don't want a mate. Why risk yourself for me? His silver eyes held hers, and for a moment she saw past the cold Alpha King to something raw beneath. Because you're mine, and I protect what's mine. It wasn't love, wasn't even affection. But it was honest, and right now, that was enough. Matthias began to chant. The language was old, predating anything Alara had heard. The symbols on the walls flared brighter, and the temperature dropped so fast her breath came out in white plumes. The candles ignited simultaneously, their flames burning an unnatural silver. At first, nothing happened. Then pressure built in her chest, like hands wrapping around her heart and squeezing. Alara gasped, her back arching involuntarily. Stay in the circle, Matthias commanded, his voice distorted by the magic. No matter what you feel, don't break the salt line. The pressure increased. Alara felt something inside her beginning to crack, hairline fractures spreading through invisible chains. Her wolf howled, not in pain but in rage, throwing itself against the weakening bonds. Then the pain hit. It felt like being turned inside out, like every nerve in her body was being flayed and set on fire simultaneously. Alara screamed, her voice raw and broken, but the sound seemed distant, muffled by the roaring in her ears. Darian's grip on her wrist tightened to the point of bruising. Through the bond, she felt him pouring strength into her, an anchor in the storm of agony. His other hand pressed against her chest, directly over her heart, and the mate bond blazed like a star. Stay with me, he growled. Don't you dare fade. The chains shattered. Power exploded outward from Alara's core, raw and uncontrolled. The candles blew out. The salt circle cracked. Wolves were thrown backward, slamming into walls. Only Darian remained unmoved, his hand still pressed to her chest, his will holding her together as her body tried to tear itself apart from the inside. Alara's wolf surged forward, no longer trapped, no longer silent. It crashed into her consciousness with the force of a tidal wave, and suddenly she wasn't alone in her own head. The wolf was there, massive and ancient and furious at the years stolen from them. Shift, Darian commanded. Let it out before it destroys you from within. But Alara didn't know how. She'd never shifted, never even felt the change begin. Panic clawed at her throat as the power built higher, pressure mounting with nowhere to go. Alara, Darian's voice cut through the chaos. Look at me. She forced her eyes open. His face filled her vision, silver eyes burning with intensity. You already know how, he said. Your wolf knows. Stop fighting it and let go. Let go, as if it were that simple, as if she could just release control and trust that she wouldn't shatter into pieces. But the alternative was dying right here, in this black stone chamber, having survived everything only to be killed by her own power. Alara stopped fighting. The shift took her like a storm. Bones cracked and reformed, muscles tore and rebuilt. Her skin rippled, sprouting fur that gleamed silver white in the renewed candlelight. The pain was excruciating but different from before, purposeful, transformative. And then it was done. Alara stood on 4 legs, her perspective shifted, her senses exploding with information. She could smell everything. Darian's scent like winter night and dominance, Matthias's magic-tinged sweat, Kira's adrenaline-laced fear, the damp stone, the burned candles, the blood from where she'd bitten her tongue. She was massive, larger than any wolf she'd ever seen, easily matching Darian's size. Her fur shimmered like moonlight on snow. And when she looked down at her paws, she saw the same silver script that had appeared on her skin now glowing faintly in her fur. "There you are," Darian said softly. He'd shifted too, standing before her in wolf form, pure black with those same silver eyes. "Welcome back." Alara's wolf wanted to bow, to submit to the obvious alpha before her. But another part, the lunar bloodline part, refused. She held his gaze, neither submitting nor challenging, simply acknowledging him as an equal. Something like satisfaction flickered across Darian's wolf features. Then he threw his head back and howled. The sound shook the chamber. Alara felt it in her bones, felt the command woven through it. And before she could think, her own voice joined his. A howl that resonated with power she didn't yet understand, announcing to every wolf within 100 miles that something had changed, that the lunar bloodline had awakened. The response was immediate. From throughout Thornhold, wolves began howling in answer, some in recognition, some in fear, some in challenge. The fortress erupted into chaos. Darian shifted back to human form, his expression grim. "That will have been heard by the envoys. They'll move up their timeline." He looked at Matthias. "How much control does she have?" Matthias pulled himself to his feet, bleeding from where he'd hit the wall. "Minimal. The chains are broken, but she's never used this power. It'll be instinctive, reactive, dangerous. Can she fight? Can she survive? Yes. Can she control it enough not to accidentally kill allies? Unknown." Kira pushed herself up, cradling her left arm. "Then she's a weapon that might explode in our faces." "Better than being defenseless," Darian countered. He turned to Alara, who was still in wolf form, overwhelmed by the sensory input. "Shift back. You need to learn to control the transition." Alara tried, reached for that human part of herself, tried to reverse what had just happened. Nothing. The wolf didn't want to let go, didn't want to be buried again after finally being free. Panic fluttered in her chest. What if she was stuck? What if... Darian's hand touched the top of her head, between her ears, and the bond pulsed gently. "Breathe. You're in control, not the wolf. It's part of you, not a separate entity. Command it. Don't ask." Command. Alara gathered what remained of her willpower and pushed. The shift reversed, slower than before but still agonizing. Bones reformed, fur receded, and then she was kneeling on the cold stone floor, naked and shaking. Someone threw a blanket over her shoulders. Kira, surprisingly. The second's expression was no longer contemptuous. Now it held something closer to wary respect. "You survived Matthias's most brutal ritual and manifested a wolf larger than our king's," Kira said. "I owe you an apology for my earlier assessment. You're not pathetic, just untrained." It was probably the closest thing to a compliment Kira had ever given anyone. Alara managed a nod, too exhausted to speak. "Get her to her quarters," Darian ordered. "Feed her. Let her rest for 2 hours. Then we begin combat training in wolf form. She needs to learn to fight with claws and teeth before the envoys arrive." 2 hours? Alara croaked. "I can barely stand." "Then you'd better learn to stand tired. This is your life now." But Darian's hand was gentle as he helped her to her feet, and through the bond she felt his grudging admiration. "You did well. Better than I expected." Your expectations must be incredibly low," Alara muttered. His laugh was short but genuine. "You have no idea." The next hours passed in a blur. Food that Alara forced down despite her churning stomach. A brief, fitful sleep plagued by dreams of running on 4 legs, of hunting, of the wolf's ancient memories bleeding into her consciousness. Then Darian was shaking her awake, his face set and hard. "They're early. The envoys are at the gates. 3 alphas, each with a full contingent of warriors, over 100 wolves, all demanding to see you." Alara sat up, her body protesting every movement. "What do they want?" "Officially, to verify the lunar bloodline claim and ensure you're being treated properly. Unofficially?" Darian's smile was razor sharp. "To assess whether you're worth stealing or if they should just kill you and eliminate the threat." "Great. Wonderful. Perfect." Alara dragged herself out of bed. "I can barely hold my shift and I've never fought as a wolf. This should go well." "You're not fighting. Not yet." Darian moved to her wardrobe, pulling out clothes, leather pants, a reinforced jacket, boots. Not training clothes. Armor. You're going to stand beside me, demonstrate your shift, and show them enough power that they think twice about challenging us. Can you do that? Do I have a choice? No. At least he was honest. 20 minutes later, Ilara stood beside Darien on Thornhold's main rampart, overlooking the courtyard where 3 alphas and their forces had assembled. The wolves below were arrayed in clear pack divisions. To the left, the Iron Paw pack, their alpha, a scarred brute named Gareth, who looked like he ate nails for breakfast. Center, the Shadowfen pack, led by a woman named Sylvia, whose cold beauty couldn't hide the calculation in her eyes. Right, the Blood Moon pack, their alpha, a younger male called Victor, who watched Ilara with undisguised hunger. Alpha King, Gareth called up, his voice like grinding stone. We've come under the old treaties. You've claimed a mate of legendary bloodline. We have the right to verify this claim. The old treaties are void, Darien replied, his voice carrying effortlessly across the courtyard. I abolished them 3 days ago. You have no rights here except those I grant you. Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. Sylvia stepped forward, her voice smoother than Gareth's, but no less dangerous. You cannot simply abolish centuries of law. The packs must agree. The packs will obey or be destroyed. That's how this works. Darien's hand found Ilara's, pulling her forward to the edge of the rampart where everyone could see her. This is Ilara Voss, my mate, carrier of the lunar bloodline. She is under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me. We've heard the rumors, Victor said, his young face twisted with skepticism. A wolf who couldn't shift. An Omega rejected by her own pack. Forgive us if we require proof beyond your word. Proof, Darien repeated. He looked at Ilara, and through the bond she felt his silent question. Can you do this? Ilara thought about the circle, about Rowan's rejection, about every wolf who'd looked at her and seen nothing but weakness. She thought about the power now pulsing beneath her skin, wild and dangerous, but finally, hers. She stepped forward to the very edge of the rampart and shifted. The transformation was faster this time, smoother, and when it finished, she stood in wolf form above the assembled packs. Her silver-white fur caught the morning light, seeming to glow. The script in her fur blazed like stars. The reaction was immediate. Wolves throughout the courtyard dropped into submission, unable to help themselves. Even the 3 alphas struggled against the instinctive urge to bow. Ilara threw her head back and howled. The sound carried power she didn't fully understand. The voice of the first wolves, the original children of the moon. It resonated in bones and blood, speaking to something primal in every wolf present. This wasn't dominance. It was recognition, the acknowledgement of lineage that predated all their petty pack politics. When the howl faded, silence held the courtyard. Then Gareth began to laugh, a harsh, bitter sound. So it's true. The lunar bloodline lives. He looked at Darien with something between respect and resentment. You lucky bastard. Do you have any idea what you possess? I know exactly what I possess, Darien said quietly. The question is whether you're stupid enough to try taking it from me. Sylvia had regained her composure, though her hands still trembled slightly. We're not here to steal your mate, Alpha King. We're here because her existence changes everything. The old power structures, the hierarchy we've built. If she can do what the legends claim, she could upend all of it. That's the idea, Darien confirmed. Then you're declaring war on the old ways. This from Victor, whose initial hunger had transformed into something more calculating. You're saying that power, not lineage, determines status, that an Omega who manifests a lunar wolf outranks an Alpha from a traditional line. I'm saying that the weak preying on the weaker ends now, that strength comes in forms beyond brute force and political maneuvering. Darien's hand rested on the rampart beside Ilara's wolf form. And yes, that will require those comfortable in the old system to adapt or be replaced. Some will fight that change, Gareth warned. The old families, the traditional packs, they won't accept an Omega as queen, bloodline, or not. Then they'll die. Simple. Final. Darien's expression left no room for negotiation. I'm offering you all a choice. Bend the knee now, accept the new order, and when the dust settles, you'll have positions of power in what comes next, or stand against us and be swept away with the rest of the old guard. The 3 alphas exchanged glances. This wasn't what they'd expected. They'd come to assess, to probe for weakness, possibly to form alliances against the Alpha King if his mate proved unworthy. Instead, they faced a unified force and a direct ultimatum. Sylvia spoke first. "I need time to consult with my pack elders." "You have until sunset," Darian said. "Then I assume your answer is no." "That's not enough time to—" "It's more than generous. Decide." Gareth stepped forward, his scarred face thoughtful. "If I bend the knee, what guarantees do I have? What stops you from using this new power to dominate all of us completely?" "Nothing," Darian admitted, "except that I've ruled the Northern Territories for 200 years without becoming a tyrant. I could have crushed you all decades ago if that was my goal. I chose cooperation instead. That doesn't change now." "But she does." Victor pointed at Alara. "You have a mate now, someone to protect, to defend, to prioritize above all else. That changes your calculations, makes you more dangerous." "Or more stable," Kira interjected from behind them. She'd been standing guard but now moved forward to address the Alphas directly. "A mated king has something to lose. That makes him more careful, not less. More invested in building something that lasts rather than ruling through fear alone." Alara shifted back to human form, keeping the blanket Kira quickly provided wrapped around herself. "You're all talking about me like I'm an object, a weapon to be used or feared, but I'm standing right here, and I have my own voice." The courtyard went silent. No one had expected her to speak. "I didn't ask for this power," Alara continued. "Didn't ask to be the last of a bloodline I didn't even know I carried. But it's mine now, and I get to decide what to do with it." She looked at each alpha in turn. "You want to know what kind of queen I'll be? The kind who remembers what it's like to be thrown away, to be called worthless, to face a circle of wolves ready to tear me apart because I didn't fit their definition of strong." Her voice hardened. "So if you're comfortable with the old ways, where the weak are prey and power is the only thing that matters, then yes, you should be afraid, because I'm going to tear that system down brick by brick, and anyone standing in the way will be destroyed." Victor's eyes widened. Sylvia's expression shifted to grudging respect. Even Gareth looked impressed despite himself. "Well," Gareth said slowly, "that's unexpected. I came here thinking I'd find a puppet. Instead, I find someone with spine." He dropped to one knee, hand over his heart. "Iron Paw Pack bends the knee. To both of you." The shock rippled through the courtyard. Gareth was the most traditional of the three alphas, the one everyone had expected to refuse. His submission changed the entire dynamic. Sylvia hesitated only a moment longer before following suit. "Shadowfen Pack acknowledges your rule." All eyes turned to Victor. The young alpha stood alone now, his forces watching him, waiting for his decision. Pride warred with pragmatism across his face. "Blood Moon Pack," he began. The explosion cut him off. The western wall erupted in flame and debris. Wolves screamed. The organized formation dissolved into chaos as a force of at least 50 warriors poured through the breach, their howls announcing their allegiance to a pack Alara didn't recognize. "Coldridge," Darian snarled. And there, at the head of the attacking force, stood Rowan Ashford, her former mate, his face twisted with rage and determination. Behind him came his father, Alpha Marcus Ashford, and the full might of the pack that had tried to execute her. "You took what was mine," Rowan shouted, his voice carrying across the chaos. "She was mine first, mine by right." Darian moved so fast he blurred. One moment he stood beside Alara, the next he'd shifted and leaped from the rampart, landing in the center of the courtyard with enough force to crack the stone. His black wolf form radiated dominance and fury. The battle erupted in earnest. Coldridge warriors clashed with Thornhold guards. The envoy pack scattered, some fighting alongside Darian's forces, others retreating to observe. Victor's wolves caught between alliance and opportunism. Alara watched it unfold from the rampart, frozen. This was her fault. Rowan had come for her, had attacked Thornhold, violated every law of pack conduct, all because he couldn't accept that she'd been someone else's mate. Kira grabbed her arm. "We need to get you to safety. Now." But Alara pulled away. "No, I'm done running, done hiding. You can't fight. You barely know how to shift." "Then I'll learn." Alara shifted, the transformation coming easier now, and before Kira could stop her, she jumped, The fall should have killed her, should have shattered every bone in her body. Instead, she landed in a crouch, her wolf form absorbing the impact with preternatural grace. The lunar bloodline wasn't just about power, it was about being more than a normal wolf in every way. She charged into the battle, instinct guiding her. A Coldridge warrior lunged at her. She twisted aside and her jaws found his throat. The taste of blood was copper and hot, and her wolf sang with savage joy. Another attacker, another kill. The power in her veins made her faster, stronger, deadlier than she had any right to be. But she was still inexperienced, still clumsy. A massive gray wolf, Thane, she recognized him from the circle, blindsided her, driving her into the ground. His jaws closed around her neck, not quite breaking through fur, but close. So close. The bond flared with Darian's rage and fear. She felt him fighting to reach her, to pull this wolf off before it killed her. But he was engaged with Marcus Ashford himself, unable to break away. Alara's wolf snarled, and something inside her clicked. The power that had been wild and uncontrolled suddenly had direction, purpose. Silver light exploded from her fur, so bright that Thane yelped and released her, staggering back. Alara rose, and the light grew brighter, spreading across the courtyard like dawn breaking. Every wolf fighting paused, unable to look away from the sheer force of energy radiating from her. When she spoke, her voice carried in a way that had nothing to do with volume. Enough! The command hit every wolf like a physical blow. Even the ones not from her pack, not under her authority, felt the weight of it. Wolves froze mid-strike. Warriors dropped their opponents. The entire battleground to a halt. Even Darian stopped, his black wolf form still locked in combat with Marcus Ashford's brown wolf. Through the bond, she felt his shock, and his realization that what she'd just done was compulsion on a scale he'd never witnessed. Rowan, still in human form, stared at her with something between horror and desire. Alara, don't. She shifted back to human, uncaring that she stood naked before hundreds of wolves, uncaring about anything except ending this before more blood was spilled. You rejected me. You called me worthless, unworthy, defective. You stood by while your pack tried to execute me. You don't get to claim me now that I'm powerful. That was a mistake. I see that now. Rowan took a step toward her, and every wolf loyal to Darian growled in warning. I felt the bond, Alara. Just because I rejected it doesn't mean it wasn't real. We could still... There is no we. There never was. Alara looked past him to Marcus Ashford, who'd shifted back to human form. You attacked Thornhold, violated sacred law. Why? Marcus's expression was cold calculation. Because my son's mate bonded with another alpha. Because the lunar bloodline belongs with traditional packs, not this modernist fool who wants to upend everything our kind has built. Because you're afraid, Alara interrupted. Afraid that if I succeed, if Darian and I change how packs operate, you'll lose your power, your comfortable position at the top of a system designed to keep others down. Careful, girl. You may have surprised us today, but you're still one wolf against many. Alara smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. Am I, though? She reached for the power still pulsing in her veins, the compulsion that had stopped the battle. This time she aimed it, focused it, poured every ounce of her will into a single command directed at the Coldridge wolves. Kneel! They dropped like puppets with cut strings. Every single Coldridge warrior, regardless of rank or strength, hit their knees and bowed their heads. Even Marcus and Rowan couldn't resist, their bodies betraying their will, forced into submission by power, older and more primal than their individual strength. The silence was absolute. Alara stood alone in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by kneeling wolves, glowing with silver light that was beginning to fade. Her legs trembled. Her vision blurred. The power was draining her, demanding more than she knew how to give. Darian appeared at her side, human again, wrapping his coat around her as her knees buckled. That's enough. You've made your point. Have I? Alara's voice was barely a whisper. Because I think they'll just keep coming, keep testing, keep trying to take what isn't theirs. Then we'll keep stopping them. Darian's arm around her waist was the only thing keeping her upright. Through the bond, he poured strength into her, sharing his seemingly limitless reserves. Together. Alara looked up at him, this alpha king who'd saved her from a circle of death, and dragged her into a war she never wanted. His silver eyes held hers, and in them she saw the truth he'd never say aloud. He needed her as much as she needed him. Not just for power, not just because of the bond, but because they were stronger together than apart. Together, she agreed. The courtyard remained frozen, Coldridge wolves still kneeling, the envoy packs watching with awe and fear, Thornhold's forces ready to strike at Darien's command. One word from him, and this would become a massacre. Instead, Darien looked at Marcus Ashford, still forced to his knees by Alara's compulsion. You have two choices. Bend the knee permanently, join the new order, and accept that your son's rejection was final and binding. Or walk away, return to your territory, and pray I never have reason to visit Coldridge again. Marcus's face was purple with rage and humiliation. You can't let her do this. She's using forbidden magic. She's using the power she was born with, the power your pack tried to suppress and destroy because you were too blind to recognize what you had. Darien's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. Choose now. Alara released the compulsion. The Coldridge wolves gasped as control returned to their bodies, but none of them stood. They stayed kneeling, waiting for their alpha's decision. Marcus Ashford looked at his son, at his warriors, at the ruins of the western wall his attack had created. He looked at Alara, who met his gaze without flinching despite her exhaustion, and he made his choice. Coldridge pack withdraws. We will not interfere in your, experiment. The word dripped with contempt. But mark my words, Alpha King. This power you're unleashing, it will destroy you both. Maybe, Darien said, but not today. Marcus rose and his wolves followed. They retreated through the broken wall in silence, Rowan glancing back one last time. The look in his eyes promised this wasn't over, but Alara was too tired to care. As the Coldridge wolves disappeared into the forest, Gareth stood from where he'd been waiting. That was the most impressive display of power I've seen in a century, and the most reckless. You could have killed yourself. But I didn't, Alara said. No, you didn't. Gareth exchanged glances with Sylvia and Victor. I think I speak for all of us when I say, we're with you, fully. Whatever comes next. Victor, who'd been silent through the entire battle, finally spoke. On one condition. When this is done, when you've rebuilt the pack system, you remember what it was like to be powerless. Don't become what you're fighting against. It was a fair request. Alara nodded. I won't forget. I promise. The three alphas departed with their forces, leaving Thornhold to assess the damage and tend to the wounded. Alara finally let Darien carry her to her quarters, her body giving out completely. The power had burned through her reserves, leaving her hollow and shaking. Matthias was waiting, his face grave. The compulsion she used, that level of control shouldn't be possible yet. The chains are broken, yes, but her power should still be wild, untrained. Unless the crisis forced her to learn faster, Darien said, laying Alara on the bed. Evolution through necessity. Or unless someone is teaching her. Matthias's eyes narrowed. Has she heard voices? Seen visions? Felt a presence guiding her? Alara, barely conscious, forced her eyes open. The wolf, my wolf. It talks to me. Shows me things. That's normal for strong wolves, Kira said from the doorway. Not like this, Matthias moved closer, studying Alara with intense focus. The lunar bloodline wolves weren't just animals. They were intelligent, capable of independent thought, of passing knowledge from generation to generation through genetic memory. If her wolf is awakening with those abilities intact, then she has access to centuries of knowledge, Darien finished. Battle tactics, power manipulation, pack politics, everything the lunar wolves learned before they were destroyed. That's impossible, Kira breathed. 3 days ago, you would have said Alara shifting was impossible, Darien pointed out. We're past impossible now. We're into uncharted territory. Alara felt herself slipping into unconsciousness, the bond with Darien a warm thread keeping her tethered to awareness. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was Matthias's voice, soft and concerned. Then the question becomes, is the wolf teaching her to survive, or is it preparing her for something else entirely? The answer, when it came in her dreams, terrified her, Because her wolf wasn't alone in the silver space behind her eyes. There were others, dozens of them, hundreds. The ghosts of the lunar bloodline, all waiting, all watching, all expecting her to finish what they'd started 2 centuries ago. Alara woke to voices. Not the ones in her head. Those had become familiar companions over the past week, the ghosts of lunar wolves whispering guidance and warnings in equal measure. These were real voices, sharp and urgent, coming from somewhere below her tower. She sat up slowly, her body still aching from the compulsion she'd unleashed 3 days ago. The power had nearly killed her. Matthias had said she'd burned through reserves that should have taken months to develop, forced her body to channel energy it wasn't ready to handle. The cost had been 3 days of fever dreams and pain so intense she'd begged Darian to let her die. He'd refused, of course, stayed by her side through every moment, his hand never leaving hers, the bond between them a lifeline that kept her anchored to the living world when the ghosts tried to pull her under. Now those ghosts were quiet, watching, waiting for something Alara didn't yet understand. She crossed to the window and looked down. The courtyard was filled with wolves, not Thornhold's usual forces, but strangers. At least 200 of them, arranged in precise formations, their eyes fixed on the fortress entrance where Darian stood with Kira flanking him. More envoys, Alara murmured, but something felt different about these. They didn't radiate hostility or challenge, they looked hopeful. A knock at her door. "Come in," she called. Matthias entered, carrying a tray with food she probably wouldn't eat and tea she definitely needed. His expression was troubled. "You're awake. Good. We have a situation." "I see them. Who are they?" "Refugees." Matthias set the tray down and moved to stand beside her at the window. "Word spread about what you did, stopping the battle, forcing an entire pack into submission without violence. About your declaration that the weak would no longer be prey." Alara's stomach dropped. And every Omega, every rejected mate, every wolf deemed unworthy by their packs has started arriving. They're asking for sanctuary, for a chance to be part of what you're building here. "That's insane. We can't possibly—" "Can't we?" Matthias turned to face her. "Alara, you changed everything when you survived that trial. When you manifested a power everyone thought extinct. These wolves, they see you as proof that the old system is broken. That being deemed weak doesn't mean you actually are. I'm not a symbol, I'm just what? A girl who should have died in a circle of judgment but instead became the Alpha King's mate? Who forced one of the most traditional packs in the territories to their knees with nothing but will and bloodline power?" Matthias's smile was wry. "Whether you want to be a symbol or not, you already are. The question is what you're going to do about it." Alara looked down at the gathered wolves again. She could see them more clearly now, thin, scarred, wearing the defeated postures of those who'd been beaten down for too long. They looked exactly like she'd felt a week ago, lost, desperate, clinging to hope because the alternative was death. "Darian won't want this," she said quietly. 200 more mouths to feed, most of them untrained, unable to contribute to the fortress defenses. "Darian's down there right now negotiating terms," Matthias interrupted. "He knows this was inevitable. The moment you declared war on the old ways, you became a beacon. These are just the first. There will be more." The ghosts in her mind stirred, and one voice rose above the others. Ancient, feminine, achingly familiar despite Alara never having heard it before. "This is how it begins. Not with armies or grand battles, but with the broken finding each other and refusing to stay broken." "Get me dressed," Alara said. "If Darian's handling this alone, he's going to make it all about strategy and defense. These wolves need to hear from someone who understands what they've been through." Matthias's eyebrows rose. "You're sure? You barely have the strength to stand. Then I'll sit. But I need to be there." 20 minutes later, Alara descended the tower stairs with Matthias supporting her elbow. Her legs felt like water. Her head swam with each step, but she forced herself forward. The guards at the base of the tower tried to stop her, but one look from her, and the silver glow that flickered involuntarily in her eyes when she was weak, made them step aside. The main hall of Thornhold was packed. Darian stood at the center, surrounded by Kira and his inner circle, facing a delegation of the refugees. The air was thick with tension, and the sour scent of fear sweat. Simply don't have the resources, Darian was saying, his voice firm but not unkind. Thornhold can support perhaps 50 additional wolves, and only if they're willing to work. Train. Contribute to the defense efforts. We'll do anything, a woman interrupted. She was young, maybe Alara's age, with a scar running from her temple to her jaw. Please. My pack was going to execute me for failing to produce an heir. When I heard about what she did, about how you protected her. I'm not a charity, Darian cut her off. I'm a king with territories to defend and enemies gathering. Every wolf I take in is a potential liability unless they can prove otherwise. Then let them prove it. Every head turned. Alara stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on Matthias, but standing nonetheless. The bond flared with Darian's surprise and irritation. He'd wanted her to rest, to recover, not to dive into politics she barely understood, but she was done letting others make decisions about her life. Alara, Darian said carefully, you should be resting. I've been resting for 3 days. I'm done. She pulled away from Matthias and walked forward, each step more steady than the last. The watching wolves parted before her, their eyes wide with something between awe and hope. These wolves came here because of me, because of what I represent. I should at least meet them. She reached Darian's side and he shifted subtly, not blocking her but positioning himself to catch her if she fell. Through the bond she felt his concern warring with grudging respect. Alara looked at the scarred woman who'd spoken. What's your name? Lyssa. Lyssa Thornwick. Tell me what happened, Lyssa. All of it. Lyssa's hands twisted together, but she met Alara's eyes. I was mated to my pack's beta. 3 years, no children. The elders said I was barren, that I was wasting a strong male's genetics. They gave me a choice, accept a trial by combat to prove I was still worthy, or leave voluntarily and be marked as Omega. You chose the trial. I chose to fight. I lost. Lyssa's hand went to her scar. The beta who gave me this was my own brother. He said it was mercy, that he could have killed me. The pack exiled me. I've been wandering for 2 months, living on scraps, hiding from rogues. When I heard about you, about a rejected Omega who became a queen, I had to come. Had to see if it was real. Alara's chest tightened. How many stories like this existed? How many wolves had been thrown away, deemed worthless, left to die because they didn't fit the mold? She turned to address the entire hall. How many of you have similar stories? Rejected, exiled, marked as less than? Hands rose. Dozens of them. More than half the refugees. And how many of you can fight? Have any training at all? Fewer hands, but still some. Maybe 20 out of the 200. Darian leaned close, his voice low. What are you doing? Giving them what I never had, a choice. Alara raised her voice. Here's what I'm offering. Sanctuary, yes. Protection from the packs that cast you out, but not as charity, as opportunity. She began to pace, slowly, conserving her strength. The old system is dying. We're building something new here, but it won't be easy. It will require work, training, sacrifice. Some of you will discover strength you never knew you had. Others will find different ways to contribute. Healing, crafting, strategy, intelligence gathering. But everyone who stays must earn their place. And if we can't, someone called from the back, then you'll be given resources and safe passage to neutral territory. No judgment, no shame, just recognition that this particular path isn't yours. Alara stopped in front of Darian, drawing strength from his solid presence. But I think you'll surprise yourselves. I know I did. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Hope, fragile but growing. Kira stepped forward, her expression skeptical. Your Majesty, this is madness. We're already stretched thin defending against the traditionalist packs. Adding untrained wolves gives us numbers, Alara interrupted. And more importantly, gives us wolves who are loyal because they chose to be here, not because they were born into obligation. She looked at Kira. You were the first to doubt me, the first to call me pathetic. What changed your mind? Kira's jaw tightened, but she answered honestly. You got back up. Every time I knocked you down, you got back up. That's not something you can teach. You either have it, or you don't. Exactly. Alara turned back to the refugees. So I'm offering you the same test I went through. Training starts tomorrow at dawn. It will be brutal. You will bleed. You will question why you came here. Some of you will quit. But those who make it through, you'll have earned a place in the new order. Not as omegas, not as rejects, as wolves. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Lisa dropped to one knee. I accept. Others followed. Not all of them. Some hung back, uncertain, overwhelmed. But more than half knelt, accepting the challenge, accepting the chance to become something more than the labels their old packs had given them. Darian's hand found Alara's lower back, steadying her as exhaustion threatened to drag her down. Through the bond, she felt his mixture of exasperation, pride, and something deeper. Recognition that she wasn't just his mate or a symbol, but a leader in her own right. Fine, he said, his voice carrying across the hall. Kira, work with Matthias to establish training groups. Start with basics: conditioning, fighting stances, pack hierarchy. Anyone who can't handle the first week goes to alternative assignments. And Alara, he turned to her, silver eyes holding hers. You're going to personally oversee this. It was your promise, your responsibility. It wasn't a question. It was a challenge, testing whether she was ready to back up her words with action. Agreed, Alara said. But I want something in return. Darian's eyebrow rose. Negotiating with your mate, bold. You want me to lead these wolves? Then I need access to the archives, the old records about the lunar bloodline. Everything you have. His expression shuddered. Those archives are restricted, dangerous. The knowledge in them is my birthright. Alara stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. The ghosts in my head are getting louder. They're showing me things, teaching me things, but it's fragmented, chaotic. I need the real history to make sense of it all. The real history will terrify you. I'm already terrified. At least let me understand why. Darian studied her for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. After training. You push yourself too hard right now, and you'll burn out before these refugees even make it through week 1. It was a fair compromise. Alara accepted it with a nod. The next week blurred into a haze of pain, determination, and small victories. Dawn came early at Thornhold, and Alara made sure she was up before it, standing in the training courtyard when the refugees arrived. Most looked terrified. Some looked defiant. All looked exhausted from their journeys. Kira took charge of the physical training, putting them through exercises that had strong wolves whimpering within the first hour, running laps up mountain trails with weighted packs, combat drills against opponents who showed no mercy, endurance tests that pushed bodies past their breaking points. Alara watched it all, learning, absorbing. At night, when her own training with Darian resumed, gentler now, focused on control rather than raw power, she incorporated what she'd seen into her own understanding of strength. You're thinking like a teacher, Darian observed one evening as they sparred in wolf form. His black wolf circled her silver one, testing her defenses, planning how to pass on knowledge rather than just accumulating it. Alara's wolf dodged his feint, countered with a snap at his shoulder that he easily avoided. Is that bad? The mind speech through the bond was getting easier, more natural. Darian's amusement rippled across the connection. No, just different. I've spent centuries being a warrior king. You're becoming something else. What? He lunged, and this time his teeth caught her scruff, not hard enough to hurt, just enough to demonstrate he could have. When he released her, his wolf's eyes were thoughtful. A revolutionary. Whether you want to be or not. By the end of the first week, 40 refugees had quit. They took the offered resources and left without shame, recognizing their limits. Alara watched them go without judgment, knowing that survival took many forms. The remaining 160 threw themselves into training with desperate intensity. Among them, leaders began to emerge. Wolves like Lissa, who discovered she had a gift for strategy. Like Marcus, no relation to the Coldridge Alpha. A massive male who'd been rejected for being too aggressive, but proved invaluable in teaching defensive formations. Like young Finn, barely 16, who couldn't fight worth a damn but had an uncanny ability to sense danger before it manifested. You're building an army, Matthias said one evening, watching the refugees drill in synchronized formations that would have been impossible a week ago. I'm building a pack, Alara corrected. There's a difference. Is there? They follow your orders, fight at your command, bleed for your vision. They choose to. That's what makes it different from the old system. Matthias was quiet for a moment. Then, the archives. You still want access. Alara's heart jumped. Darian agreed? Reluctantly. He set conditions. I supervise, we take it slow, and the moment it becomes too much, we stop. Matthias's expression was grave. The lunar bloodline's history isn't pretty, Alara. There's a reason they were hunted to extinction. I need to know. The ghosts won't shut up until I understand what they're trying to tell me. The archives occupied a chamber carved deep into Thornhold's foundations, accessible only through a series of warded doors that made Alara's skin crawl. The air tasted old, thick with the weight of centuries. Shelves stretched into darkness, packed with texts written in languages that shifted and changed when she tried to read them. Lunar script, Matthias explained, lighting candles that burned with the same silver flame she'd seen in her own power. It adapts to the reader, but only if you carry the bloodline. To anyone else, it's gibberish. Alara approached the nearest shelf. The moment her fingers touched the spine of a leather-bound tome, images flooded her mind. The first wolves, enormous and terrible, running beneath a moon that blazed like a second sun. Packs bowing before them, not in submission, but in reverence. The lunar wolves weren't just powerful, they were judges, arbiters, the voice of the moon itself given flesh. But power bred fear, and fear bred resentment. The images shifted, showing the first assassination. A lunar wolf torn apart by a coordinated pack attack, their silver blood staining snow red. Then another killing, and another. A systematic genocide driven by alphas who refused to live under the moon's judgment. The last lunar wolf, a female, heavily pregnant, running through a forest with pursuers closing in. She reached a cave, went inside, and the vision ended. Alara gasped, pulling her hand back, her heart hammered, tears streaming down her face without her permission. That was my ancestor, she whispered. The last one. She hid her child, used magic to suppress its power so completely that no one would ever know, and bound that suppression to only break when the child found a mate strong enough to protect them through the awakening, Matthias finished. A fail-safe. A way to ensure the bloodline survived but stayed hidden until the time was right. But why me? Why now? Maybe because the world is ready, or maybe... Matthias pulled another book from the shelf, this one bound in what looked disturbingly like hide. Because the lunar bloodline has unfinished business. The book fell open to a page covered in silver script. As Alara read, her blood turned to ice. It was a prophecy, a warning, a promise. When the moon's blood rises again, the old order will fall. The packs will scatter or unite. The strong will kneel or die. And the one who is cast aside will decide whether the wolves deserve to survive at all. That's insane, Alara breathed. I can't. Can't what? Reshape pack society? You're already doing it. Matthias closed the book gently. The question isn't whether you can, it's whether you should. Alara left the archives with her mind reeling, barely aware of Matthias guiding her back to the upper levels. The prophecy echoed in her thoughts, mixing with the ghost's whispers, creating a cacophony she couldn't silence. She found Darian on the ramparts, staring out at the valley where lights from the refugee camp twinkled like fallen stars. He didn't turn when she approached, but the bond told her he knew she was there. Bad? He asked quietly. Terrifying. Alara moved to stand beside him. Did you know? About the prophecy? I suspected. The lunar bloodline's return was always meant to be a reckoning. His jaw tightened. What are you going to do? I don't know. The ghosts want me to complete what my ancestors started, to judge the packs, to tear down the corrupt and rebuild from scratch. But that would mean war on a scale we can't imagine. You could also choose to do nothing. Live quietly, master your power, stay out of pack politics. Alara laughed bitterly. You know that's impossible. Every traditionalist alpha in the territories wants me dead or controlled. Doing nothing just means dying slowly instead of fighting back. Then fight. Darian finally turned to face her, silver eyes burning with intensity. But fight smart. You've proven you can inspire loyalty, can turn rejects into warriors. Use that. Build your power base slowly, make alliances, Pick your battles. Like you've been doing for 200 years? Exactly like that. It's kept me alive and kept the territories relatively stable. But it hasn't changed anything fundamental. The weak are still prey. The rejects still die. Darian's expression softened fractionally. No system is perfect, but burning everything down without a clear plan for what comes next, that's how you create chaos, not change. He was right, and Alara hated it. The part of her that still remembered the circle, still felt the helpless rage of being thrown away, wanted to tear the whole rotten system apart. But the part that had been training refugees, watching them grow stronger, seeing hope replace despair, that part knew change had to be built, not just destroyed. The prophecy says I get to decide if wolves deserve to survive, she said quietly. That's too much power for one person. Then don't carry it alone. Darian's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. That's what mates are for. The bond pulsed warm and steady between them, and for the first time since the archives, Alara felt grounded. A commotion from below interrupted the moment. Shouts, the clash of metal, the sharp scent of blood on the wind. Darian was moving before Alara could react, shifting mid-leap and landing in the courtyard as a massive black wolf. Alara followed, her own shift coming as naturally as breathing now. The training ground was chaos. Refugee wolves scattered, Thornhold guards forming a defensive perimeter around. Rowan. He stood in human form, hands raised, blood streaming from a dozen wounds. Behind him, 5 other Coldridge wolves lay dead, torn apart by Thornhold's defenses. I came alone, Rowan gasped as Darian's wolf stalked toward him, murder in every line. Please, I need to speak with Alara. It's about my father, about what he's planning. Darian shifted back, naked and unconcerned, his voice deadly calm. You have 30 seconds before I tear out your throat. Talk. Marcus is gathering the traditionalist packs, all of them. He's promising them that if they unite, they can destroy Thornhold, kill Alara, and end this uprising before it spreads. Rowan's eyes found Alara, desperate and pleading. It's not just Coldridge anymore, it's 12 packs, maybe more. They're coming in 1 week, and they won't stop until everyone here is dead. Silence fell across the courtyard. 12 packs, thousands of wolves, against Thornhold's forces and 160 barely trained refugees. It was suicide. Alara shifted back to human, uncaring about modesty, her mind racing. Why tell us? Why betray your own father? Rowan's face twisted. Because he's wrong. I was wrong. I watched what you did, stopping that battle, offering sanctuary to the rejects, building something real instead of just ruling through fear. That's not weakness, that's strength I was too blind to see. And you expect us to trust you? Hira's voice dripped skepticism. You could be lying. This could be a trap. It could be, Rowan agreed, but it's not. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, don't deserve a second chance. But these wolves, he gestured to the refugees, they do. And they'll die if you're not ready for what's coming. Alara looked at Darian. The bond carried his cold calculation, his instinct to kill Rowan where he stood and deal with the threat when it arrived. But she also felt his recognition of truth. Rowan was terrified, genuine in his warning. Put him in the cells, Alara decided. We'll verify his information. If he's lying, he dies. If he's telling the truth, then we have 1 week to prepare for a war we can't win, Darian finished grimly. Guards dragged Rowan away. The courtyard slowly emptied as wolves returned to their posts, but the energy had shifted. Fear hung thick in the air, mixing with determination and the bitter taste of coming violence. Alara stood alone in the center of the training ground, looking at the refugees who'd chosen to stay. They watched her with frightened eyes, waiting for leadership, for reassurance, for some sign that choosing her hadn't been a fatal mistake. The ghost stirred and that ancient female voice rose above the others. Now comes the real test. Not survival, not awakening, but choice. Will you hide in hope, or will you stand and fight? Alara thought about the circle, about the prophecy, about every wolf who'd ever been cast aside, deemed unworthy, left to die because they didn't fit someone else's definition of strength. She thought about Lisa's scar, about Marcus's gift for defense, about young Finn's danger sense, about 160 wolves who'd found hope when they should have found death. and she made her choice. "Tomorrow, we don't train as usual," she called out, her voice carrying across the courtyard with unnatural clarity. "Tomorrow we train for war, real war, not exercises, not drills. We have 1 week to become an army, and we're going to use every second of it." Kira stepped forward. "Alara, be realistic. Even with perfect training, we're outnumbered 10 to 1. Then we don't fight fair. We use strategy, terrain, the element of surprise. We make them think we're weak, lure them into traps, turn their numbers into a liability." Alara's eyes blazed silver as the power rose in her veins. "And when they come expecting to crush a rebellion, they'll find a revolution instead." The refugees erupted in cheers, raw, desperate, defiant. The sound rolled across Thornhold like thunder, a promise and a challenge wrapped into one. Darian moved to her side, and though his expression remained severe, the bond carried approval. "You really are a revolutionary." "No," Alara corrected, looking out at the wolves who'd chosen to follow her into almost certain death. "I'm just someone who's tired of being told what's impossible." She raised her voice one final time. 1 week, 7 days to prepare. Any who want to leave, now's your chance. No judgment, no shame. But if you stay, you fight. For the right to exist without permission. For a world where being different doesn't mean being disposable. For every wolf who's ever been told they weren't good enough. We fight. The response was deafening. Not just from the refugees, but from Thornhold's own forces. From wolves who'd served under Darian's strict rule for decades, and were finally seeing a purpose beyond simple survival. This was the moment. The turning point. Not when Alara survived the circle, not when she manifested her power, but now, when she chose to stand instead of run, to fight instead of hide, to believe that something better was worth dying for. Above them, the moon broke through the clouds, bathing the courtyard in silver light. And for just a moment, Alara could have sworn she saw them, the ghosts of the lunar bloodline, watching with ancient eyes, nodding their approval. The war was coming, but this time the rejects would be ready. The war was coming. 7 days had never felt so short. Alara stood in the training courtyard at dawn on the second day, watching her army, because that's what they were now, move through formations that would have been impossible a week ago. Lissa commanded the left flank, her strategic mind turning chaos into coordinated strikes. Marcus anchored the center, his size and aggression channeled into devastating defensive walls. Young Finn moved between groups, his danger sense allowing him to predict gaps before they formed. They were still outmatched, still outnumbered, still facing almost certain death, but they were no longer helpless. The scouts confirmed Rowan's information, Kira reported, approaching with Darian at her side. Both looked grim. 12 packs, moving in coordinated formation. They'll reach Thornhold in 5 days, maybe 4 if they push hard. "Numbers?" Alara asked, not taking her eyes off her wolves. 3,000, maybe more. Darian's voice was flat, emotionless, the way it got when he was calculating odds he didn't like. "Even accounting for our defensive position, our superior training, and your power, we're looking at casualties in the 70% range. Best case." "Then we need to change the battlefield." Alara finally turned to face them. "Matthias, is he ready?" Kira's expression darkened. "What you're asking him to do, the magic required, it could kill him. And even if it works, there's no guarantee it'll be enough." "It'll be enough." Alara's certainty came from the ghosts, whispering strategies that had worked 2 centuries ago when the lunar bloodline had faced similar odds. "Trust me." Darian studied her face, then nodded slowly. "I'll have him begin preparations. But Alara, if this goes wrong, if we lose, we won't." She cut him off, perhaps too sharply. The bond carried her determination, her refusal to consider failure. "We can't afford to." The third day brought unexpected allies. Gareth arrived with 50 of his strongest warriors, their arrival announced by howls that echoed through the valley. He strode into Thornhold like he owned it, his scarred face split in a vicious grin. "Heard you were about to get your asses handed to you," he said without preamble. "Figured I'd come watch. Maybe participate if the mood strikes." You're risking your pack for us," Alara said. "Why?" Gareth's expression sobered. "Because I'm old enough to remember when the strong protected the weak instead of preying on them. When packs were families, not hierarchies. You're trying to build that again. He shrugged. Besides, Marcus Ashford's an arrogant prick. Be satisfying to knock him down a few pegs. Sylvia arrived the next day with 40 wolves, her cold beauty concealing fierce determination. My pack elders voted to stay neutral, she said. I told them to go to hell. Some things are worth fighting for. Even Victor showed up on the 5th day, though his contribution was different. I can't send warriors. My pack won't allow it. He looked genuinely pained, but I can send information, detailed maps of the traditionalist pack's territories, their weaknesses, their internal politics. And he hesitated. I can spread rumors. Make Marcus think some of his allies are considering switching sides. Sow discord. Psychological warfare, Alara said. Smart. I learned from watching you. Victor managed a small smile. You fight with more than just teeth and claws. Time the old guard learned that lesson. By the morning of the 6th day, Thornhold had transformed. The western wall, destroyed by Coldridge's initial attack, had been rebuilt, but not as it was. Matthias had woven protective wards into the stone itself, invisible barriers that would slow attackers and channel them into kill zones. The refugees, combined with Thornhold's original forces and the allied packs, numbered just over 400 trained fighters, still outnumbered 7-1, but no longer impossible odds. Alara stood on the ramparts at sunset, watching the last preparations. Below, wolves moved with purpose, sharpening weapons, running final drills, saying quiet goodbyes to those who might not survive tomorrow, because tomorrow was the day. Scouts had confirmed the traditionalist army would arrive at dawn. You should rest. Darian materialized beside her, moving with that unnatural silence. The battle will demand everything you have. I can't sleep, too much nervous energy. Alara leaned against the cold stone. Did Matthias finish? Yes, the ritual circle is ready. But Alara, what you're asking him to do, what you're planning, it's never been attempted on this scale. The magic could backfire, could destroy us as easily as our enemies. It won't. You can't know that. I can. Alara turned to face him fully. The ghost showed me. My ancestor, the last lunar wolf, she did something similar when the hunters came for her. She turned the forest itself into a weapon. It worked then. It'll work now. Darian's silver eyes searched hers. And if it doesn't? If we all die tomorrow because you trusted voices in your head? Then we die fighting for something that mattered. That's more than most wolves get. Alara reached out, her hand finding his. You could still evacuate. Take your most loyal wolves and retreat to the deep mountains. Rebuild elsewhere. And leave you here alone? Darian's laugh was bitter. The bond won't let me. Even if I wanted to, which I don't, I physically couldn't abandon you to this. I know. I just wanted to give you the choice I never got. He pulled her close, and for once, the gesture wasn't about dominance or the bond or political strategy. It was just two people facing death and finding comfort in not facing it alone. When this is over, Darian said quietly, his lips against her hair, we need to talk about what comes next. About actually building this new world you keep promising instead of just surviving long enough to see tomorrow. When this is over, Alara agreed. But first we win. They stood together as night fell, watching the stars emerge one by one, each point of light a silent witness to the battle that would decide everything. Dawn broke cold and merciless. Alara stood in the center of Matthias's ritual circle, carved into the stone courtyard, with silver that gleamed like captured moonlight. Around her, candles burned with that familiar silver flame, and the air tasted like copper and ozone, an ancient power waking after centuries of sleep. Once we begin, there's no stopping, Matthias warned. He looked exhausted, his face drawn, the marks on his arms pulsing with sickly light. The magic will feed on your power, my life force, and the connection between you and the land itself. If you lose control, I won't. Alara's voice was steady despite her hammering heart. Begin. Matthias started to chant. The language was older than the one he'd used to break her chains. This was the first language, the words the moon had taught the original wolves. As he spoke, Alara felt the earth beneath her feet respond, felt something vast and patient wake from its slumber. On the ramparts, Darien watched the valley. The traditionalist army had appeared at first light, a mass of wolves stretching across the landscape like a living shadow. Thousands of them, all moving with single-minded purpose toward Thornhold, toward Alara. "Archers ready," Kira commanded. "First volley on my mark." But Darien raised his hand. "Wait, let them get closer. Let them commit." Marcus Ashford led the charge, his brown wolf massive and scarred from decades of battles. Around him ran the alphas of 11 other packs, their forces arrayed in traditional formation, heavy fighters in front, swift attackers on the flanks, long-range support in the rear. It was textbook pack warfare. Efficient, proven, deadly, and exactly what Alara had been counting on. The first attackers reached the valley floor, charging across open ground toward Thornhold's walls. They expected resistance, arrows, defensive formations, maybe a sortie from the gates. Instead, the ground opened beneath them. Matthias's ritual had done more than just wake the land. It had turned the valley itself into a weapon. Chasms split the earth, swallowing dozens of wolves. Trees that had stood silent for centuries suddenly lashed out with branches like whips, striking with force that shattered bones. The stream running through the valley flash-flooded, becoming a raging torrent that swept attackers off their feet. The charge broke into chaos. "Now," Darien commanded. Thornhold's gates opened. Not to release their forces, to reveal Alara, standing alone in the gateway, glowing with silver light so bright it hurt to look at directly. She stepped forward, and every wolf on the battlefield felt it, the weight of ancient power, the voice of the moon itself given flesh. Even Marcus Ashford stumbled, his wolf form instinctively cringing away from that terrible presence. "You came to destroy me," Alara said, and her voice carried across the valley with unnatural clarity. "To execute a threat before it could challenge your comfortable power. To murder the weak before they could prove your entire system wrong." She took another step. The ground beneath her feet bloomed with silver flowers, impossible, beautiful, deadly. Where they grew, the earth itself seemed to crystallize, forming barriers that cut off retreat routes and forced attackers into narrower and narrower channels. "But I'm not weak. I was never weak. I was suppressed, controlled, kept ignorant of my own strength because you feared what would happen when wolves like me woke up." Marcus shifted back to human form, his voice carrying across the broken battlefield. "You're a monster, an abomination. The lunar bloodline was destroyed for good reason. You're too dangerous to exist." "Dangerous to who?" Alara's power flared brighter. "To alphas who rule through fear? To packs that throw away anyone who doesn't fit their narrow definition of worthy? Yes, I'm dangerous to them. I'm meant to be." She raised her hands, and the ghosts answered. They poured out of her, spectral wolves made of silver light, the spirits of the lunar bloodline that had been slaughtered 2 centuries ago. They didn't attack. They just stood there, hundreds of them, surrounding Alara in a circle of ancient judgment. "My ancestors were killed because they demanded better from you," Alara continued. "They said the strong should protect the weak, not prey on them. They said power came with responsibility. They said no wolf deserved to die just for being different." Her eyes blazed. "They were right. And you killed them for it. We did what was necessary for survival." Another alpha, Alara didn't know his name, shouted from the back. "The natural order demands the strong rule." "Then let's test that theory." Alara's smile was sharp and cold. "I challenge Marcus Ashford. Single combat. He wins. I submit. I'll disband my forces, accept execution, whatever he wants. But if I win, the Traditionalist Alliance dissolves, the old laws end, and you all bend the knee to the new order." Silence fell across the battlefield. 3,000 wolves held their breath, waiting. Marcus shifted back to wolf form, his brown fur bristling with rage. He was easily twice Alara's size, scarred from 100 battles, an alpha in his prime. This should be suicide for her, but the ghosts whispered strategies, showed her weaknesses, taught her techniques that had been lost for centuries. Darien's voice cut through her mind via the bond. "You don't have to do this. We can still fight, still win through attrition." "No," Alara sent back. "This is how it has to end. One way or another, the old order dies today." She shifted, her silver wolf emerging in a blaze of light. The ghosts merged with her, their knowledge becoming hers, their power flowing through her veins. When she howled, it wasn't just Alara's voice. It was the voice of every lunar wolf who'd ever lived, every ancestor demanding justice. Marcus charged. The battle that followed was unlike anything the gathered wolves had ever witnessed. Marcus fought with brutal efficiency, using his size and strength to try to overpower Alara. But she flowed around his attacks like water, her smaller size becoming an advantage as she darted beneath his guard, her teeth finding purchase in vulnerable spots. He bled. She bled. They circled, struck, separated, circled again. The watching wolves were silent, mesmerized by the sheer ferocity of two ideologies made flesh and locked in mortal combat. Marcus's jaws closed around Alara's foreleg, and she felt bone crack. Pain exploded through her, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she twisted into the grip, using his own hold against him, and her teeth found his throat. Not to kill, just to hold, to force him into a position where one wrong move would end his life. They froze, locked together, both bleeding, both exhausted. The ghosts whispered to Alara, "Finish it, end him, make him pay for every wolf who died because of his kind." But Alara had learned something in her weeks at Thornhold, training refugees, building an army from cast-offs and rejects. Revenge felt good, but it didn't build anything. Justice demanded more than just blood. She released him. Marcus staggered back, confused and wary. Alara shifted to human form, standing naked and bleeding in the center of the battlefield, her silver eyes fixed on the Alpha who'd led his forces here to destroy her. "I could have killed you," she said quietly. "The ghosts wanted me to. But I'm not here to perpetuate the cycle of violence. I'm here to end it." She looked past Marcus to the thousands of wolves watching. "You came here expecting a monster, someone who'd prove your fears right, who'd justify the genocide of my bloodline. Instead, you found someone offering mercy to the Alpha who tried to execute her." She spread her arms. "So I'll ask again. Which is more monstrous, showing mercy or refusing to change a system that demands we keep killing each other?" Marcus slowly shifted back to human form. Blood streamed from the wounds on his throat, but they weren't fatal. He stood there, pride warring with pragmatism, old certainty crumbling against new reality. "You're asking me to abandon everything I believe," he said hoarsely. "I'm asking you to believe in something better." Alara's voice softened. "Your son already did. Rowan warned us you were coming, gave us time to prepare. Not because he betrayed you, but because he couldn't watch you lead thousands to their deaths defending a lie." Marcus's head snapped toward his forces. Somewhere in that mass of wolves, Rowan stood. Alara had released him from the cells that morning, given him a choice between staying imprisoned or fighting alongside the defenders. He'd chosen to fight. "Rowan?" Marcus called. A gray wolf emerged from the traditionalist ranks, shifting to human as he approached. Rowan looked at his father with a mixture of love and disappointment. "She's right, Father. I've watched what she's building. It's not chaos. It's not weakness. It's just different. Better." "You don't understand what you're asking," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "The old ways have kept us stable for centuries. Changing them has already begun," Gareth interrupted, stepping forward from Thornhold's defenders. "I'm one of the oldest alphas alive, Marcus. I remember when the old ways were new, when they were implemented to bring order out of chaos. But systems that don't adapt become prisons. This girl," he gestured at Alara, "she's offering us a chance to evolve instead of stagnate." Sylvia joined him. "My pack was ready to condemn me for supporting her. Then I showed them what we've built here in just days. Wolves who were marked for death becoming warriors, rejects becoming leaders. They saw the potential." One by one, the allied alphas stepped forward, each sharing similar stories. And slowly, wolves from the traditionalist army began to shift, not physically, but ideologically. Uncertainty replacing conviction. Questions replacing blind obedience. Marcus looked at Alara, and she saw the moment he broke. Not in defeat, but in exhausted recognition that fighting change was just another way of dying. "If I bend the knee," he said slowly, "what guarantees do we have? What stops this from becoming just another tyranny with a prettier face?" "Nothing," Alara admitted, "except that I remember what it felt like to be powerless, to be judged worthless, to face a circle of death and know no one cared if I lived or died." She moved closer, holding his gaze. That memory will keep me honest, will keep me fighting for the wolves who can't fight for themselves. But if you're asking for a guarantee that power won't corrupt me, I can't give you that. All I can promise is to try, every day, to be better than what came before. It was perhaps the most honest answer Marcus Ashford had ever received from someone in power, and maybe that's what finally convinced him. He dropped to one knee. Coldridge Pack bends the knee, to the lunar bloodline, to the new order. The sound that rippled through 3,000 wolves was like a physical force, gasps, murmurs, shouts of disbelief. Some of the traditionalist alphas looked ready to rebel, to refuse, to keep fighting. But Marcus was the strongest among them. His submission set a precedent that couldn't be ignored. One by one, the other alphas knelt, some reluctantly, some with relief, all recognizing that the world had changed, and their choice was to change with it or be swept away. Alara stood in the center of the battlefield, surrounded by kneeling wolves, feeling the weight of what she'd just accomplished crash down on her. She'd done it, actually done it. Changed pack society through a combination of power, mercy, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept that things couldn't be different. The ghosts whispered approval, then began to fade. Their work was done. The lunar bloodline lived again, and this time it would survive. Darian appeared at her side, wrapping his coat around her shoulders, his presence steady and grounding. Through the bond, she felt his mixture of pride, relief, and something deeper. Love, perhaps, though neither of them had dared name it yet. "Well," he murmured, "that was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever witnessed." "Can't it be both?" Alara leaned against him, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. "Knowing you, probably." His arm wrapped around her waist, supporting her as her legs threatened to give out. "Come on, let's get you inside before you collapse in front of your new subjects." "Subjects?" Alara tested the word. "I don't like it. Sounds too much like the old way." "Then what would you prefer?" She looked across the battlefield, at wolves slowly rising, at the refugees who'd become warriors, at the allies who'd risked everything for an ideal, at former enemies beginning the difficult process of becoming something else. "Pack," she said finally. "Just pack. All of us. Together." The weeks that followed were chaos of a different kind. 12 packs had to be integrated into a new structure. Old grudges had to be addressed. Wolves who'd spent their lives believing in hierarchy had to learn cooperation. It wasn't smooth. There were fights, challenges, moments when Alara thought the whole thing might collapse. But slowly, painfully, it worked. Lissa became head of strategic planning, her gift for seeing patterns proving invaluable in organizing resources. Marcus, the former exile, not the Coldridge Alpha, led defense training, teaching wolves to protect instead of dominate. Young Finn's danger sense was cultivated, turning him into an early warning system that saved lives. Even Rowan found a place, working with wolves who'd been rejected by their mates, helping them heal from the trauma of abandonment. Marcus Ashford struggled the most. Old habits died hard, and watching his son embrace the new ways while he wrestled with the old created tension. But he tried. And trying, Alara learned, was sometimes enough. 3 months after the battle, on a clear winter night, Darian called a gathering of all the packs in the valley. Thousands of wolves assembled, covering the hillsides like a living carpet. Alara stood beside him on the ramparts, stronger now, in control of her power in ways she hadn't been during the battle. The ghosts still whispered sometimes, but quieter, more like advisors than commanders. "For 2 centuries, Darian's voice carried across the valley, "I've ruled through strength and fear. It kept the territories stable, but it didn't make them thrive. That changes tonight." He turned to Alara, and his expression was open in a way she'd never seen. Alara Voss proved that strength comes in forms we weren't wise enough to recognize, that the wolves we discarded often carried the power we needed most. She challenged me, challenged all of us, to be better. Darian dropped to one knee before her, and the valley went utterly silent. "I've been the Alpha King for long enough. It's time for something new." His silver eyes met hers. "Alara Voss, carrier of the lunar bloodline, mate of my soul, will you stand beside me? Not as my subordinate, but as my equal. Will you be the queen this new world needs?" Alara's breath caught. This wasn't just a title. It was recognition. validation. The final transformation from the girl left to die in a circle to the woman who'd rewritten the rules. On one condition, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. We do this together. Not you ruling and me supporting, not me leading and you following. True partnership. I wouldn't have it any other way. Alara helped him to his feet, then turned to face the assembled wolves. The old order is dead, not because we destroyed it, but because we offered something better. A world where every wolf has value, where strength is measured by what you build, not what you destroy, where the weak are protected, the rejected are welcomed, and no one has to die alone in a circle of judgment. She let her power rise, silver light washing across the valley like dawn. Some of you will hate this. Will long for the old ways. That's fine. We won't force anyone to stay. But for those who choose this path, who choose to build instead of just survive, welcome home. The howling started with the refugees, then spread to Thornhold's original forces, then to the allied packs. Finally, even some of the former traditionalists joined in, their voices blending into a chorus that shook the mountains. It was acceptance, acknowledgement, the birth of something new. That night, in their shared quarters, Darian pulled Alara close. The bond between them had evolved beyond survival, beyond strategy. It was genuine now, messy and complicated and real. Any regrets? He asked quietly. Alara thought about the circle, about Rowan's rejection, about every moment of pain and fear and desperation that had led her here. No. Those wolves who tried to kill me did me a favor. They forced me to become something I never would have been if they'd just let me live quietly. And what's that? Free. She smiled against his shoulder. Finally, completely free. 6 months later, Alara stood in the same clearing where she'd once faced a circle of death. But this time, she wasn't kneeling. She was teaching. 20 young wolves sat before her, all of them rejects, all of them told they weren't good enough. She knew their stories intimately. The Omega who couldn't shift, the runt deemed too small to survive, the wolf with a damaged leg that never healed right. The old world would have killed you, Alara told them, marked you as waste, expendable. But in the new world, we don't measure worth by traditional standards. We find what makes each of you unique and build from there. She demonstrated, shifting to her silver wolf form with an ease that still amazed her. I was told I'd never shift, that I was defective, broken, and maybe by their measures I was, but by my own measures, she shifted back, I'm exactly what I need to be. One of the young wolves, a female with scars from an old mauling, raised her hand tentatively. But what if we really are weak? What if we can't fight or lead or contribute the way the strong wolves do? Alara crouched to the girl's level. Strength isn't about fighting. It's about surviving when everything tells you to give up. It's about getting back up when you're knocked down. It's about choosing to believe in something better, even when the world shows you nothing but cruelty. She smiled. You're already strong. You just need to learn to see it. The training session continued, and Alara watched these broken wolves begin to believe in themselves. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't instant, but it was real. This was the victory, not the battle, not the submission of the packs. This, the slow, patient work of rebuilding wolves who'd been torn down, of creating a world where no one had to face a circle alone. As the sun set, painting the snow gold and crimson, Darian appeared at the edge of the clearing. He leaned against a tree, watching with those silver eyes that no longer seemed quite so cold. When the session ended and the young wolves dispersed, chattering with cautious hope, he approached. You're good at this. At what? Making them believe. He pulled her close, and the bond hummed with contentment. I'm good at ruling, at strategy, at maintaining order. But you make them want to be better. That's a gift I've never had. Then it's good we're in this together. Alara looked back at the clearing one last time. The circle was still there, faint impressions in the snow. But it no longer held power over her. It was just a reminder of how far she'd come. They walked back to Thornhold hand in hand, the future stretching before them. Uncertain, challenging, but finally theirs to shape. Behind them, the wind erased their footprints, covering the past with new snow. And in the distance, the moon rose over the mountains, bright and eternal, watching over the wolves who'd learned to howl in harmony instead of tearing each other apart. The girl who'd once faced death in a circle had become a queen. But more than that, she'd become exactly who she was always meant to be, not despite her rejection, but because of it. Because sometimes the greatest strength comes from surviving what should have destroyed you and choosing to build something better from the ashes. The old order was dead. The new world had begun. And Alara Voss, last of the lunar bloodline, stood at its center, no longer the girl no one wanted, but the queen no one could afford to lose.